Morning, everyone. If you are not on mute currently, if you would mute yourselves, there will be an opportunity if you have questions later on to ask questions. But for everyone to be able to hear and not be distracted, people, please put yourselves on mute. We will start in a couple of minutes, admitting everyone as the list keeps growing. About 226, and people are still coming. I am recording. As you know, I do record GT Tuesdays. So just want to say welcome back to a new year, a new school year, starting out differently than we've typically done. But we're going to survive this. We are going to get through and have hopefully a great year, better than some, with all challenges going forward. Still got a couple coming in, so take a minute, breathe. All right. So I'll keep watching for people to show up, but we'll go ahead and it's 9:03. So go ahead and get started with this. So I've heard that y'all miss GT Tuesdays. Y'all miss these little opportunities of conversation and getting together. So they are back. As you know, I did plan for coming back. But we're rolling and we'll get started. And so today we're going to talk about a couple of things. The FAQ, if you have not seen it, it is out and available for you. And we're going to address one section of the FAQ, which was pretty much people had questions over, and what everyone is wondering about at this point in time is identification. So that is where we're going to start. We'll talk about a couple of resources that we put out this summer. And then I was shared a new letter yesterday. So I will share that also. And then answer your questions as we go forward. And I forgot to put it in this one, but you know, at the end of the year, we were doing wellness checks. So how is everyone doing? Is everyone well? Is everyone, I know everyone's kind of at some kind of point of a level of stress, worry, or concern, but everyone, hopefully everyone is doing good. As we go into this new season, first days of school, we'll have to talk about that one and see how everyone is doing. So our Zoom meeting conversations for this year will still kind of be the same as last year. We will look at, put the spin of how do we do it in this virtual world, because I know us being in the state of Texas, we're at so many different levels. We have those who are doing such a great job of going back to face-to-face. Then we have those who are totally virtual, and then those who have not started, and then those who are getting ready to start, and then we have those who are in the hybrid mode. But so we're going to look at how do we do this in this new world, and as we move forward, how do we conquer all of our systems to make the best educational program services for our students. So that is our goal this time around. So I always like to remind you of our state goal. And so what we're looking at is those students. What are our services look like so that our students can demonstrate their self-directed learning? And at this time, that is really what some of our kids are doing, is that self-directed learning. They're thinking, they're researching, the communication. And how do they do that? With those innovative products and performances that shows their individuality and creativity. So what do we look for? And then basically, how are we helping our educators, our teachers, and our cohorts see that in the virtual world? That's where we have to go to as we start looking at, they're not with them every day in the classroom, not seeing all those characteristics build out, because we will still have to continue with identification and program services, and so that our programs and build will still be growing. And then what does that look like when they're comparing them to their students of a similar age, experience, or their environment? And then what are our high school graduates doing? Have they participated in GT services? What do their products look like? What is that professional quality that we're looking for as we go forth? Still got people coming in, yay, and welcome. So we got some people into 3 weeks. Oh, hold on. Turn on silent. All right. So it's been a busy summer for some of us, and then some of us are still hitting hard strong. So our upcoming GT Tuesdays, I'm doing 2 editions, still keeping the 9 and the 1, except for one incident. And I'm trying to work smarter and not harder. So this year, I was able to do a recurring meeting. So the Zoom link will be the same for either the morning edition or the afternoon edition. So depending on which one. So these are our dates for our morning, not today. Happy September 1st. And for some of you, happy payday. And then October 13th, and then November the 10th. And that will be the last one before December. And then I'll put the December dates up. Then the next one is afternoons. And I first planned for December 15th at 1. And then I looked and I was like, oh, I have a conference I'm presenting at that time and day. So I just pushed us up to 3. I hope that, as I said, I record these. So if you can't make it at 3, please take a time to review, look at it later. And then we're back at our 1 o'clock sessions on October 27th. And then, as I said, I'll come up with our December dates for this. I decided not to do one on the week of Thanksgiving. So even though we might be still at our home bases or work, but it's like we're on holiday break. Some of you are. So as always, you can get your GT Tuesdays. The links from last year are still available. I'm going to reformat that page so that it will be easy to find these additions as we go forth. And so that is where we are with that. Yeah, I might hit the 300 max number today. Yay. And as I said, and I wanted to put this slide in so that we can all see where these are the top 10 counties. And as you know, in the in the state of Texas, we know when we're planning that we have to think about all of the incidents, all of the sizes, from rural school districts to the major metropolitan school districts. So a lot of you are our hotbeds and our hot sources. And so it really depends on where you are, what you are able to do, and you know that. So be very cognizant of what your district and county safety procedures are. What can you do? What can you not do? What is going forward? As you go forth in planning your school year and in planning what your next steps are, we're going to talk about identification today, as I said. But I want you to be really cognizant of that some of this is going to be very broad because we as a state of Texas in gifted and talented education, we do very much allow for local control. So the guidance is going to be not specifically where I'm going to be telling you, you have to do this, you have to do that. Now I will probably tell you what you can't do, but I'm going to give you some options, some things to consider, but it's going to be your guidance. But then you have to make the decisions based on where you are as a district and what is allowable in your district. Because some of you have no COVID. You can walk into your campus, you can walk into your buildings, and you can do, it's a normal process for you. Some of you, you will never think about stepping outside of your door. And that's just the real world where we live at right now. So we have to take those two extremes, those two different platforms into mind as we go forward. So if you have not seen it, hopefully you've been made aware, you've looked at it. The FAQ is available. It is posted on the website. That is the website for you if you need to grab it, to look at it. If you have questions, I know some of you have. And then the other thing while we're here on this one, if you have questions about anything with guidance related around this at this point, please send it to, and I'll put it in the chat, disasterinfo.tea.texas.gov, and to myself. That is the platform that we're using as an agency to answer your questions and to get that. And that will lead to more further build out of our FAQ and further guidance as we go forward. So let me do that before my mind. And so that helps us as we go forth in building out these FAQs to answer your questions, to prepare for your needs. So if you remember, and as you know from our state plan, so when we look at our gifted and talented identification procedures, and we're also looking at progress and monitoring, but we're really talking about identification. Thank you, Amber. What does that mean when we allow students to demonstrate and develop their diverse talents and skills, and what are we looking for? And so a couple of questions that I've received that after the FAQ that kind of walks around with that is how we're going to handle nominations and testing to identify our GT students this year. And is TA going to give districts a waiver from seeking nominations? So those are some questions I received. So no, there will be no waivers this year. We really need to put our game out there, figure out what we're going to do in that process. And that's part of our conversation today. And then as we go further into the slides, I will be talking about there is a coming on as we go forth. So as I said, there is no waiver. As you remember, last year we did have one for the spring. It is expected that you resume and you conduct safe assessments. And so that depends. And as I said, when I had the COVID slide up where our numbers are, it really depends on your district and where you are as a district. When you think about if you're not safe to go back into the buildings at this time or to go forth in that process, then it might be, you might be thinking either we're looking at December or you're looking at January as your entire process starting back up. Or you're looking at, let's move to November. So you have to really think about what is the safe place, what you can do, how can you do it as you go forward. And so you have to take those in considerations as you go forward. Some of you are at the process. So where are you thinking? So as we look at how do we continue from from our spring administration, so you got to look at where were you at that point in time. Some of you should have documented that point, and how do you resume? A lot of you did resume over the summer. Some of you resumed in May. As we go forth and looking at this, and then some of you are still in that process. Thinking about the measure that you chose, determine if it's still that you're using, still if it's still the best option for those students with the spring, with the administration. Some of them may have a birthday over the summer. Does that change? Would you go back, or are you using all of the results from that point in time? So that's one of those things you will have to consider. And as you go forth, people wait. And if they finish their testing, don't start. It's not necessarily you have to start over, but be very sure of what you're going to do. So it may be nothing is required. So think about what subtest needs to be completed, can be scored according to the date the test was taken. What are you looking for as you go forward? But then always be consistent in whatever you're doing. That consistency helps you stay out of trouble. If you give one person a leeway, that one person may take that for a whole and spread that around, and everyone's looking for that same leeway. So just be consistent with what you're doing and let everyone know what that is. And then especially your G team or your selection committees or those who are administering, this is what we're doing. This is how we're going to do it. Because, once you start to, sometimes when you go that off ramp and you go that side road, sometimes the side road has more nails than the actual clear path. So just think about where you're going. And then have that concise information for your parents about your continuation plan or whatever, or if it's even if a delay in the process, or this is going to be our referral process for this year, and let them know how you're going to protect their child in whatever measure that you're using and what the expectations are. And so for some of you, that's really going to be taking into account that you need to talk to your vendors on what do they have available. Some of you will have to be, it's a hard decision, but it's going to be, hey, what other options do we have for measures? What other options do we need to consider? And then for others, it may be, it's the norm. We're doing what we've always been doing. And then a very few of you is going to be really creative on what are we looking for, and it's really a turnover on your whole identification process. And it might have been time for it. It might be time to start thinking elsewhere, but you have to think in the long run, what am I looking for GT students? What am I looking for our program services? How do we serve these students? Did this measure really work? Is it really what's going forth for our services? And thinking, how do we do better? And how do we increase that? So what do you need to do? How do you want to look at that? And then as we go forward, we'll move forward. So always go back to the state plan and keep it real. So you have to remember we offer assessment opportunities at least once per school year. So what are your assessment opportunities for this year? And what are you looking for? And when will it happen? I know a lot of you with that opportunity in May, April and May, it really threw us. And then some of you got into the process, some of you did not. So you have to, so that really brought to the front, is this still the most appropriate time to provide services? Or do we need to look at it a little bit different for our identification process? And then looking at ongoing identification, especially in this year, and when we start looking, are we looking at, and when we say ongoing identification, I think we all need to start thinking of, it's not one way that fits all in our processing. So if you're looking at a student through a checklist, a criteria, or an ongoing observations, that's a part of your identification process. So how are you looking at those students for the entire year? It's not a series of tests that goes all year long. It might be observations. It might be the checklist. It might be teachers looking for certain things, because we have to start thinking, and we'll help you with that process of what do we look for in kids now that we're in this virtual world? How will our giftedness, those traits and those different characteristics, how we look at creativity, innovation as we move forward? So we have to think, let's walk out of a different process on how we do this. So your ongoing identification might change this year. So the question on the FAQ that kind of threw people, can districts require in-person testing on school or non-school days? And someone did ask, we're looking for a little clarification on that. So when you read the sentence, read the question, one, we do not require students to take a testing period for gifted and talented. It's still a parent option. So if a kid is referred for GT identification, you cannot require in-person GT testing only. Right now, parents will have that right to opt out. Now, at this point in time, they're going to be opting out of in-person testing. And we'll talk about some of your options for that. So you can offer a virtual identification process. You can offer in person, or a combination of the two to accommodate the student population. And you can offer those tests on non-school days. Now, I would not recommend Sundays because that, but I know a lot of you do give your Saturdays up for GT testing prior to this. So, or you might extend to after-hour testing. So think about your options. But then you might have your virtual option that you have a vendor, you have that process, and there's a way that it can be secure. That is your option. But you have to let them know what that your community and your families know what are their options as you go forth, and have those conversations. I know a lot of you may not be able to do that. Some of you are having that. And you're putting in the chat of what you're using. And on that note, also, we're updating our list of what tests are available and what processes are going forward. So hopefully we'll have a clear view on some other options for you very soon. But really just thinking, and then for some of you, you do not want kids in your buildings. You do not want them in your environment for your own safety settings. So that required part is really what you have to consider. One, GT testing is still an option. We offer the opportunity. So thinking about that as we go forward. Now, if a kid, so then we talk about clarify that remote learning constitutes a student exceptionality for the purposes of identifying students providing assessment. So remote learning is not a student exceptionality. We really want to make sure it is an exceptionality, but it's not a student exceptionality. So that's where we're looking at that. But we do ask that you consider, you have to still do the same processes, whatever, for your students. So you may modify the assessment process for remote learning. You still have to provide whatever accommodations or modifications through that remote instruction or that testing. And then, as you know, our state plan allows for those modifications for student exceptionalities. So as you think about how do you do this, how do you do a remote testing, how do you do, if you're doing that process, it's really having a conversation with your vendors, and it's a possibility. I know a lot of them put out webinars this summer to have those conversations, to talk about their tests, their measures, and what they're looking for and how they're doing it. I try not to get into that world of what tests you're using and how to use those. because that is a local district decision.
Hey,
But
Monica.
hello,
Hi,
Paulina.
it's Paulina. How are you?
I'm good.
You've got a couple of questions, and before we move much further on, I just wanted to make sure you saw there are some questions like from Kelsey. Um, are you saying we have to offer assessment options students can do from home? I've seen that a couple of times, so just wanted to get some clarification on what these virtual options have to look like.
Okay. I think I have a slide further down on that, so we'll catch it. I'll try to, and then I'll come back to catch all questions. So if I don't catch your question in my slides, I will come back to you, okay? So when we think about access to assessment, so you have to think, what does that look like? And we're into this new world of, it may be a virtual test, it might not be a different measure. So what are you looking at when you're looking at that process? And so this is what our state plan has, 2.19 and 2.24. It is available to all populations of your district. So when you think about what are you using, what are you moving forward to, it might have to really look different as you go forth, as you go into this process. And I hope I get everyone's questions in a minute. So when you think about in-school administration, so there's two options, you know, when you're thinking about it, you're gonna have your remote or your in-school. So for your in-school, you have to ensure you're doing the safety procedures that are for your administration. So you got to think of what your county and what your district has to say about that process. And then start looking at how many students can you assess at a time. And if you're doing, I know there's different things here in the state of Texas that people do. So if you're doing district level administration, how many sites? Can you do it for safety? Do you still do it campus-based, or do you move it to one centralized location where you have more control over your cleaning process and your sanitation process between administrations? And then what are those parameters for students? What do they, do they come in with certain things, or do they just come with their mask and that is it, and you have everything else available for you? So you have to think about those if you're looking at your, if you're doing your district, and if you're same thing for your campus. Do you need a computer lab or a regular classroom or a large, the cafeteria? What is your best place to want to do your 6 feet separation, but then also looking at how many kids and how many proctors you may need for a room. So thinking of those processes, and then thinking about school, you might have to look at going forward from, it might be best after school, or it might be best for a Saturday because of the space limitations during the school day. If you have on-site, you're back in school for testing, for classes. Then we'll get to our remote administration. So you have to ensure that you have whatever access that you may need. And it's a standardized process for all that they're looking at it. What are those alternative measures for identification? And what I mean by alternative measures, so if you cannot, and I know a lot of you put in the chat, if you cannot use your COGAT, your INAT, or your other tests that you typically use, what are some of the other things that you have available? What are the other measures that you can look at to use during this process? What other, alternate measures that you can identify and use for this process, for standardized versus non-reference? So what are those other options that you can pull into? Some of you have district standardized results that you can use that are group administered, that you can go into this process. Some of you have excellent checklists, other processes that you can bring in to go into this questionnaire. There are other observation forms that you may want to consider as you go into this. So it's not always, I'm looking at the same test as you go for. And so that goes into our testing venues. So is it a centralized spot? Are you looking at various campuses? Are you looking at a after hours or that online? And you know, those are your options. You have to think about what goes forth as you look at your district and as your campus. What are your options? And so here's one district's consideration based on some questions that I've received. So if they have a student who's chosen face-to-face during GT screening periods because their district is going that, so, and they have a GATE program, so they can do those tests, those students who are on home campuses, whatever, they follow the procedures. So if they're on campus face-to-face, they can do their testing there. If they are, but then those who've chosen remote instruction, we cannot make them come to testing on campus. And for some of them, it's really a safety issue for them because they do have health issues. So you can offer them now. One, you can offer them alternative testing sites or locations, such as your central office or your administration building, where you can be individualized or small groups, or you have to consider a remote instruction for that test, a remote virtual test. Or you have to start thinking, and we'll get to that in a minute. So you got to think about your evidence, and you're looking at multiple sources. And so some of your sources may not have a test on it this time. Some of them may have a little bit different. You have to start thinking about your different processes. So, and we're looking at qualitative and quantitative data and looking at that. And so we'll get to that here. So you got to remember our quantitative, we're looking at assessments that are rather objective and measurable. You're using that when you want to look at that focus and you want to have that control or that standardized results. And then when you look at 1A, you have to look at your local norms, okay? So you have to think about that, and we got a great resource in there. And these will be coming out also in another form. So some examples are your tests, your grades, your non-reference, norm reference tests. And so how you look at that. So you got to think, what are you using? And as you know, we've always talked about our measures, and we've always looked at, we're a very test-driven populace, but you know, test scores are not the sole criteria of our students. So you got to think about what else can you use. And that's where we're really getting at. If, you know, a test is something you cannot give at this point in time, what can you consider? What will get you to the point this is going to represent and build into our program services? And it might be a very comprehensive student interview. It might be building a virtual portfolio. So you got to really start thinking, how are you going to score it? How are you going to look at it? What kind of data can get you to that point to get you to the next point? And then we'll get into our quantitative, where you're looking at that objective and measurable data. Nope. There we go. Qualitative. And then where we're looking at our subjective data about a student. And so where you're looking at is more flexible, it's authentic, and you have different contexts. So you're looking at our whole child, and we're looking at all of the pieces of that kid. And so that's where you start looking at some of those inventories, those questionnaires, some other things that can get you to the data that you're looking for. And so you're looking at a holistic process. So you're looking a little bit more, and it should bring more equity into your process. And so thinking of those pieces. So when you start thinking about your measures for identification, some of you have use your mandatory screening data or your group administered test. Some of you give maps, some of you do Iowa, some of you do Stanford 9, activity. So whatever your district is using as a already district test, you have those results, use that. And then what is a technology based? There's the HOPE scales, there's other student identifying scales that you can use, but then think about your appropriate tests that you can use. So here are a list of tests that you can look at, consider, and they're just different ones. I will provide this as a separate handout in the on the website once I post. So don't worry about trying to screen capture everything here. So, and then you have other group administered tests, our creativity test, and then these are a little bit more of some portfolios that we look at and that you can use. So I'll provide the list of these different measures when you by the end of the day. So those will be up at that point. So as you go forth and you're talking to your community and your families, let them know what your procedures are. This is just reinstating what our rules are, our guidelines, that they should have some kind of a notice of what you're looking for, and then is in the language of our families at that point in time. So your forms and all your procedures. So here's the big question. So say a parent still says no to in-person testing. So as you know, and we've always said this, and so this is not a new statement, one criterion should not remove a student from the DT assessment process. So if a parent says no, that is not an automatic denial of identification, okay? So you can't have your denial letters ready to go if they say no. So you got to think, so you got at least four things that you can think of. There might be a little bit more. You can offer the measure virtually at home, so some kind of process. You consider what other measures that you may want to use virtually. And then you can postpone. And with this postponement, is not a forever postponement. At this point, I'm recommending 3 months. Because during those 3 months, you can consider what other options you can use. You can consider your possible virtual options, or by that point, virtual options may be a better option for virtual. Or at that point, and we might be in a separate place where that child will be allowed for one-on-one or small group testing. So you have to think about where we may be in that point in time. 3 months from this point probably is about January. So when you think about, you should have something in place. Or you can still proceed with the identification without that measure. So those are some things to consider at this point as you go forward. As you know, we basically say you got to have at least 3 measures as you look through the process. Sometimes you have 5. And so you just need to develop a plan for your implementation. What are you going to do? How are you going to do that? If we need to have another talking point session, I think September, it might be 29th. I think that's one of the GT Tuesdays I kind of dropped off because I typically do 2 a month, but that could be just really a Q&A day or a just open conversation and someone can share. And basically, I can do a beautiful platform for you where we can all just kind of talk about what we're doing and how we're doing it and come up with a process. So let me know if that is something you want to do there. So back to our communication. So just informing people of what your process is, thinking about that. And then at this point, really having, a nice little, information session on the process, the procedures, how it's going to look will also, and what are you doing differently will help alleviate some of the concern for our parents. As I said, some of them they're really concerned about their kids coming in, especially those with, health issues. What are their awareness? And then some of you have to consider, these students coming in with your own health issues. So really thinking of what are our safe measures, procedures, our methods on to do this, and then really looking at how do we do testing and identification without a, for some it will be without a test. So once they're assessed, you provide your services and you're looking at their areas of giftedness, and then depending on what you're looking for, leadership, artistic, and creativity areas are used as criteria. So you have to think about what are your services in those areas. Placement. As we think about placement as we go forward, because I know that's our next big kind of conversation. What do we do? How do we provide services? And when do we start putting kids into these programs? And then so we'll look at that one next. What are your options and how are you serving kids? Or how you've been denied serving the ability to serve kids. So you got to think about what is your placement, where are they going, and then having those selection committee conversations and making sure that you have those right trained people into that process. In all of this, we still have to think about our populations and being equitable and fair with our processes of what are we looking for, because you're still looking at our population, and we've seen with our populations as we've gone forward, some have better access to technology to others, and some are missing from our process. So how are our students, and how are you really looking at your program services to make sure that all populations are being reflected and being captured in your testing process? All right, so this is an opportunity for share, but I think I'll go forth and catch some questions, and I'll go all the way back to 9. Or if someone has a burning question, they just want to unmic.
Monica, can I ask a clarifying question? This is Kelsey from Allen.
Hi, Kelsey. How are you?
Hey. Okay, so, well, I have my camera turned on. It's not showing me, but I'm here, I promise. Good morning, everybody. I just want to go back to clarifying exactly what we need to do for our at-home students. So if I can, let me recap how I understand it, and if you'll tell me, yes, I've got it right, or no, I don't, that would be appreciated. Okay. So for our at-home learners, the way I understand it is we do not have to allow them to take the test from home as long as we are offering non-school day administrations in locations other than the school building where they're not mixing with the in-person learners. Do I have that correct?
So that's partly correct. So if a parent is fine with that, you're good to go. You might have a parent that still says, no, I do not want them in any building. What is your second option?
So then the FAQ document, or doesn't really mean or.
I have to look at that.
Yeah, it's I grabbed it just to make sure as I've been trying to parse out my
or,
understanding.
I think it really should be an and or.
But the document says or.
Or.
The reason I'm pressing on this so much is I have, and I think a lot of us do based on the chat, some very, some pretty serious concerns about the reliability of the data that we would get if we're allowing students to be testing from home. And I am fortunate in my situation that we are done with our 1920 testing. So my mind is already going to kinder testing. But I have some serious concerns if kids are at home with a parent taking the test, in terms of how much are we really getting the child's ability, how much is the parent helping or not helping. I would feel uncomfortable making identification decisions, just knowing how much help might be happening.
Okay, so I think this is where, and I'm just pulling up the FAQ for those who do not have a copy of it with them.
Monica, this is Devin Holmes from Justin ISD. Just a quick thought on that issue. The TSI, the Texas Success Initiative test, we give that virtually with Zoom, and you can proctor the test through Zoom and monitor what the kid's doing in the situation, and that could really help with test security.
The only thing is that you can't monitor if they're taking the test on an iPad, because then Zoom, the camera no longer works.
Mm-hmm.
We required our students who took it on an iPad to have a second device. So they had to use their phone for WebEx and put it next to them so I could still see their face. So they had to have two devices if they wanted to test on an iPad.
Which, when you're trying to monitor 1,500 kindergartners, that's a pretty, I mean, that would be our year, basically, if we had to do that one by one so that we could monitor.
This is Monica Simons. I want to piggyback on that if that's okay, because I agree with everything. But also, I think there's an equity issue here as well, because there are students who have not been in an educational environment who may have a difficult time navigating testing at home. And they're already going to have some challenges in having their ability show up on a test when they've not been in an educational environment, and we're not having the opportunity to observe them and collect data on them in other ways. And now they are in a situation where they don't have multiple devices and they do not know how to take an assessment without someone like us being there to support them.
Agreed. And Monica, it's again, talking about kindergarten, that's a lot to ask a kindergartner to do for something with such a massive decision. And then also the equity issue of access at home, someone at home to make sure the kindergartners taking the test, if they're from homes where education has not been the prevalent and common experience, I think we're just widening the equity gap that we're trying so hard to fight.
I understand.
I have a real concern about giving it to kindergarten K through 2 at home. We've been giving the Iowa to 3rd and up, and it's okay, but I just can't imagine a kindergartner sitting for multiple, like by themselves. I just can't. And I'm with Kelsey on that. I have a big concern that we're testing, last year we tested 3,700 kids. And if we have to do this all in small groups, virtually, it's hard to do more than like 5 kids at a time. I don't know how, I don't really have a solution for how that's going to happen, because I don't know about y'all, but my teachers are the ones giving the tests and they still have to teach. So they don't have all the time to just test all the time.
Monica, I want to add what Marjorie Moeller has said, that in rural districts, there's going to be an internet access issue. And that's a good point too. For those of us in, I'm in the Metroplex, that's something to remember, is we've given hotspots to everyone, but maybe everyone doesn't have that option.
Well, and everyone hasn't had access to hotspots, so there's still that connectivity gap there also. And I think that's where it goes back to that statement of, so if they can't come in, and you have that virtual identification process or that in-person. So you have that in-person. If you can't have that virtual, and I do understand, you really have to start thinking, kindergartners, that's going to be a hard process. One, is it worth, it's not worth giving that many kids that kind of test virtually. And one, I always challenged why. A lot of people did, you know, you got to think about what do you want to do with your kinders? What are your measures? And how do you want to look for that? And that is not at home test is probably not the best, and that, you know, them and using technology and their mind span and your own gaps. I think that's really, really hard to do. So, we'll have to look at options for that for your kinders. Yeah.
Monica, I have a just point of clarification. This is Brittany Rogers. I'm from Nixon Smiley.
Yes.
So if the option was either they come to the location we're offering where students do not go, or the other option would be postponing their test for 3 months or whatever that may be, so that maybe they could come in during that time, or maybe the remote learning would be over. I mean, we can all hope. Could that be the two options that you give them? You could either tell them they could come take the test, or they can postpone their test for 3 months.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for clarifying that, Monica. Knowing that postpone is another option, that's very helpful. So thank you for that real clear answer on that.
Yeah. No problem. Shanna, I'm looking at yours for the no longer than 3 months. So I'm really thinking, well, here's the thing, if you're going to postpone for longer than 3 months, is it all going to be wrapped into your traditional testing period, which might be your March, April, May. And then that would make sense. But if it's not if your traditional is March, April, May, knowing that we might be still in this COVID world where you may need longer processes to get smaller amount of students, because you have to think, depending on where you were, you might get 20 kids at a testing period, where now you might only get 6 or maybe 10. So you might need to see, do I need a larger space? Do I need more places? Those are some things you have to consider when you start thinking about that. So you might have to break out to your process of, I need to expand my window of testing just to get the numbers in, or really working with your leadership to say, okay, we got these kids, we got this coming in, what do we do? And then how do you step away from, and some of you, it might be, I have to step away from COGAT, or I have to step away from NNAP because I can't do it virtually, I cannot do it on site if you want to move forward. And so you got to think about what are your options. And I think I was asking questions out of the chat. So someone just asked a question, can you still use NNAT and COGAT for in-person? Definitely you can. And you can change your virtual for something different. Those are your options, you as a district deciding which is best. So, and then someone asked, they do a universal screening in 2nd grade. Should we switch it to kinder to meet the March 1st deadline? I think that might be an option that you can consider and maybe plan for. But you also have to think, is that in your budget financing, or what is that screener going to look like if you do move to kinder? So thinking about that, and I always will say, think about what's available in your district. What are you using? Are you using maps, Iowa? What are some scores out there that you have that you can build upon as you go forward? I'm trying to read, so. I'm trying to catch questions. So I think I'm going seeing some different things. Sidebar chats in the chat. All right. Is there any other questions out there that someone wants to pop into as I scroll?
Good morning. I just want to verify on the upcoming GT Tuesdays for the PM on the 9/15. That's going to be at 3 o'clock instead of 1 o'clock.
3 o'clock instead of 1 o'clock.
Perfect.
Yes.
Thank
Yes.
you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. And for those who came in late, yes, I do record these. Yes, I do post these on the website. And so at the end of today, I will be posting the chat. So this is what I typically post. I post the PowerPoint. I post the video recording of this. And then I also I post the chat log. So these beautiful conversation pieces, you get all of that. And then any resources that anyone else shares or links to things there. So those are some things that I do post and share. All right. Is there a district that want to share what they're doing currently at this time? I'll give you another opportunity in a little bit. So one of the options and things to think about, especially for your primary readers and for your early age students, is a very old resource, but is a great resource, is Reading Strategies for Advanced Primary Readers. It was developed prior to my time, but it does have, was built out by Bertie Kingdorf and a small task force for TA for Texas. So there are some checklists, there are some observation forms, some things that you can think about and use as you go into looking at your kinders, your K2, excuse me, in this process. So here's another option. It is available on the website. That is the link for you there. So this is the webpage where you will find all of our GT Tuesdays. They are by, I might flip it this time, put the first one at the top. So as I said, so if you want to go back to last year's resources, they're there. The new ones will be coming on starting today. I typically try to do it within the day. It depends on the length of the recording. And how long does it take to do that? Oh, someone wants the link. Let me go back. Oh, sorry. And I will put it in the, there we go. Someone put it in the chat for me. Thank you, Amber. Okay. And so here is the latest document. We will be phasing out the FAQ document that is on the website, and what we've developed with the guidance of the Commissioners Advisory Council for Gifted and Talented, we have broken down the how to interpret the Texas State Plan. So you will see guidance there on the state plan, different sections, actually addressing a couple of student groups, and it still follows the same layout, but it's more of here is some true actual guidance that you may want to use, and is really an excellent tool for you if you haven't been out there to look at that yet. I would recommend it. And then while I have one other thing to share. So while I'm getting that, are there any questions?
Hey, with the chat, I know y'all have questions. It's hard to keep up with all these suggestions.
Can you adjust the volume? Someone's having a hard time hearing.
I don't know if it's my volume or if it might be their volume.
All right, this is Melanie. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay. So I'm wondering if I choose to use the MAPS scores or STAR scores from the past just to get some basic quantitative data on ability. Are other people doing that? And if so, what additional testing are they using to sort of balance that information?
I do know that some districts do use maps, some do STAR, not as much as maps or Iowa. But if someone is out there, I think Heather is using that. Jennifer is using that. So if anyone wants to unmute and assist with that question, practical in the world, what you're doing. You have a lot in the chat.
I can share.
Thank you.
This is Mandy from Dripping Springs ISD, just west of Austin. So we use MAP testing, and our district's fairly new to it. However, for GT this past year, we just use it really as a universal screener. Since kids were already taking it, it provided us a data point that was kind of already done for us, if you will, in our GT department to kind of a jumping off point. So I think I read in the chat, somebody said they used MAP and they took the top 10% of kids, when the kids that scored in the top 10% on MAP. And we kind of did a similar thing. We didn't take them as far as qualify them outright for the program, but we said, oh, okay, these kids scored in the 90th percentile or higher. We need to reach out to the teacher and say, hey, tell us more about this kid. And then also reach out to parents to say, hey, have you thought about this? Have you considered GT, that kind of thing? So we kind of use it as more of a reaching out point to help us to early identify. And then we do not use STAR scores at all for anything around GT. So that's kind of how we're using MAP in our district.
Hey, Monica, this is Delana.
Yes.
And I don't mind sharing what we're doing in our district. We use MAP as well as the STAR scores for those grade levels that it's available from the previous year. But then we also use our internal STAR 360, beginning of year and middle of year scores. And then we have kind of an initial matrix, if you will, that every child gets screened every other year with those scores. And then depending upon what that initial screener looks like, then we move to GT testing and your traditional matrix that you think of for GT with COGAT, INNAT, Renzulli, et cetera, and qualitative, quantitative. But that's how we use our MAP and STAR, as well as our STAR 360 scores. Those are kind of they're on a matrix, and it's just an initial screener that we do for every child.
Thank you. We got Dr. Johnson on. Kelsey, you had a question.
I did, but it is not about MAP or STAR or anything in that realm. And so I don't, if there was more follow-up questions on that, I don't want to take us to a new topic. But I don't see anyone, I should say. The chat's still rolling. My question is the postponing for 3 months as one of the options, obviously not the only. I am not seeing that anywhere in the FAQs document. And I know it's in these slides here and they will be put onto the website, but is that going to be, well, I should say, am I missing it in the FAQ documents, or will it be put in any other document just so that we have that, you know, should we be questioned on it?
So currently it is nowhere else but here. We can update the FAQ. Oh, I know. I'm sorry. Let me step back. It will come out, and we are working on the final phases of another document that will be a little more in depth, and it will be there. I could say it could be there.
Wonderful. And you'll be posting these slides too, so we'll have that as well. Okay, great. Thank you, Monica.
You're welcome. You're welcome. While we're waiting for questions, and it's about 10:07, so I'm gonna give a few more minutes. But Paulina forwarded this letter to me yesterday. It actually comes from the commissioner Commissioner Marath. As you know, TAGT sent a letter in of some of your select questions to the I think Paulina has a copy of this up, and then I will put a link up also, so you'll have a copy of the letter. Basically what it says is that, you know, we did put out guidance, and let me check these. Did that improve it? They put a copy in there. So as you see, basically, school guidance is been placed on the website, and we'll keep updating that. And if you have further questions, please send them to me. And then, but as you know, we are living in the House Bill 3 world, and we're finalizing some of the documentation for that as we go forward. But if a district fails to provide GT services, they are at risk of losing funding. So please, if you need to use this document for within your district, please use it. You have access to it. And yeah, remember, no optimizing of the view that messes it up.
Ms. Brewer?
Yes.
Hi, my name is Jennifer Williams. I have a question about the length of what is the minimum length of time they need to be serviced per week? I was told it was an hour. Is that correct?
Well, it's really a local district decision.
Okay.
So if the state does not give you a specific time, we have never come up with that. That might be something the CAC might want to address at another point. It really, I will say, look at it might be in your current policies and procedures.
I know that, so I used to pull twice a week for about 50 minutes. And now with online learning and everything happening, I've been told to only pull once a week. So I just want to make sure we're in compliance. And I know, you know, we are still pulling, but I just want to make sure we are in compliance.
So I would say, look at your district policy. I know everything has kind of changed, but when you think of what that time limit is, kind of see if it's comparable, or really are you totally out of whack of what your own district policies may say.
Okay.
So Because I know it fluctuates from some districts from 45 minutes to a whole 3 hours or to an entire day. So it really just depends. We've never
I know
put it out specifically. Yeah.
I know technically they can be serviced in classroom. I know that. I just know that realistically, that doesn't always happen. So
that is true.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. All right. Other questions? I see Paulina and I think Macy has put the link that they have out there for the letter. As I said, I will put the link on the GT Tuesday page also. If there are no other questions, wonderings.
Monica, this is Leanna Lachlan from Castleberry. I do have a question about providing services. We are using a once a week model. We're completely virtual right now and won't go back into face-to-face until the 28th of September, but we've also developed an asynchronous choice board for gifted and talented students based on grade levels. So there are like they're paired, K1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I'm reflecting on what I'm hearing, and I'm also becoming a little bit anxious after reading all these chats about being in compliance and doing the right thing and the testing. And I think I'm good on testing, but I just need your feedback on, is an asynchronous plan with a once a week check-in going to suffice as providing services while we're in virtual?
Well, one, it depends on when you think about that plan and what are you doing and what does that check-in is meant to accomplish. So are you, and then a couple other things to consider is what else are they doing? So if they're working on, and I think I'm gonna take you back to the state goal of that self-directed learning. So at this point, this is probably where we can really get away with a lot of self-directed learning and allowing them to be creative in our own worlds in GT. But how are we being supportive? So you have that weekly check-in, which is probably more than some do. And then some for some less. But you got that weekly check-in, you got that, their projects, their products. So you have something that is coming in that you can say that they're doing, that you're looking at, and that you're reviewing. I will say, because I can't say this is going to work for everyone, because another district is totally going into specifics into, they got pieces in the home learning, they got this, that, and whatsoever. So, but you have to look at, is this meeting your service goals for your district? And the models that's been selected and provided, and it's a possibility, yes, it will meet the criteria. At this point in time, we have to remember, as we look at all of our processes, we're looking at a whole different sets of worlds. We're looking at a traditional, this is what's going on. We're looking at a virtual process, and then we got some doing synchronous, we're doing some that are doing asynchronous, but then what you're doing in your district with choice boards may look totally different in Pecan Street with their choice boards. So it depends on where you are and how you're looking at that process. So I can't say that you're not doing it well. You will have to be, and that's where your own program evaluation goes into this process. How are you looking at, is this meeting our needs? Is it meeting the student needs as we go forward? A couple of things in that is, right now, as you know, you may or may not know, the state is rolling out, has rolled out 2 versions currently of Texas Home Learning. 3.0 has rolled out and probably will roll out definitely for today. Within that, we're looking at, and I'm looking at K-12, all subject areas, of making sure that there is some component, some piece that will meet the needs of our gifted and talented students or our teachers to help them in their processing. But then what are you going back to We know everyone does not believe in differentiated instruction. Everyone has a different mindset on this. Some people believe that if I do it all, take it to that level of GT for all kids, that is good. And I don't have to do nothing different. And we know that it's, you know, I'm not going on that box today. But I will say, look at what you're doing. If it's meeting your student needs and you see growth, because that goes back to your own progress monitoring with those students, I say you're doing your job.
All right, thank you.
Did that help you?
Yes, I'm still not totally convinced, but I think I'm no different than anybody else who's reflecting and trying to.
And I think that's the beauty of our own world, is we're always our own self-critics and we're always looking to get better. But because we do not have, this is specifically, because we are so much a local control state and a local control program, you have to look at what is your processing, because I can't tell you specifically, this is what we got to do. As long as you meet the standards, you meet the process, I think you know, that is where you want to look at your process.
Okay, well, we also started, well, we're also doing cluster grouping in 2 academic areas, K through 5, but that's new this year. And so we're also doing that as well. We're not just doing one thing, but it's new. And so I know the teachers need a lot of support, and just under these circumstances, it's really hard to get in there and roll up our sleeves together to work on this when we're trying to do so many other new things at the same time. But I appreciate your feedback. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi, Monica.
Yes.
Hi, this is Marcy Alford at Church Cibolo Universal City.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about on the FAQ under program services number 6, it talks about how do we document that we're providing GT services for students? Like maybe some suggestions on what that might look like.
So, how are you documenting services? So, depending on the services that you're providing, and let me just stop sharing. Yeah, let's see. It depends on what your services are. So it might be, if you're doing like Leanne was just talking about her choice boards. Those are her documentation of her opportunities. It may be your teacher's weekly log of who they're contacting, who they're working with. It might be that. It might be a teacher's lesson plan as they go forward. So I think it really looks at who that district and that campus, and what are you, and so you're determining what are your options. I guess the question would be, what are you providing, and what are you looking for? Because it's going to be a little bit different from everyone. It might be, these are your choice, you know, these are our weekly lessons because you're doing it all on the website and everyone finds them there. It could be there.
I guess I'm just wondering, because on here it specifically talks about the teachers logging, like maintaining a log of services. Is that something that's just like for our own accountability?
And you have to remember, you're not sending anything to me, so it's not your own accountability. You are the your school board is the monitor of your program, so you're not sending anything to me. But you really need to document how you're providing services, because at some point when we do move into, as we phase into our certification process, you got to be able to say, these are the providing of services, because we have parents who are watching their kids learn at home and not feeling that they're receiving an education. So you have to back up, how do we provide services? So that's going to be the question. So what services did you provide? So you got to think, what can I say that, yes, these are the services. Now, the quality, it depends on the teacher, and depends on which some of you have no control over, because, you know, I just know from when I was in the district, some school building principals put the best they had in the classroom for GT, and then some put, because they felt that they're going to do the less harm, put that person in that classroom, okay? And knowing that they put the less harm, all they did was spelling bee, any fairs, any projects. That's all they did. They did not do any other materials unless you ask. So you have to really think of, what are we doing? How are we doing? And those are just a few. It's not everything, because everyone's a little bit different on their process. So that is what we're going to be looking at. Other questions?
Hi, I'm Debbie Stopper from Alief ISD, and along with what you were just talking about is that we also do a log of services. All our GT specialists turn them in at the end of the year. So that's one of the things how we keep track, and then we keep it in a folder every year. And then also we have, they do a lot of, you know, presentations and stuff. So, and they always invite parents to it and us. And so we keep track of that also. So I just wanted to share that.
Thank you. Those are some options. So there's no specific set, this is the state request on this is how you're going to do documentation. So it can vary. So. Other questions, wonderings? Because it is almost 10:30. So once again, as we get ready to roll out, this will be available for you on the website. And let me give you, for those who do not have my contact information, here is my email, and you can reach me at either monica.brewer or gted at ta.texas.gov. And also here is my line with the agency. As we are remote working, it does forward straight to my telephone. So call me if you have questions, 512-475-0626. As I said, our next meeting is December 15th, 2020 at 3 p.m. And then if you have further questions, feel free to email me, make a phone call. Here's the thing, if you email, I can always update our FAQs to build it out there and put in more information there. So let me check the chat right quick. Make sure I got all questions. Before we walk away for our day. Okay, so someone has a question. As part of the certification process, the FAQ mentions submitting a plan in all learning platforms. So basically, depending on where your plan, so if you're doing as you know, that what are your plans? So if you're doing at home, synchronous, asynchronous, those kind of things, that's where those plans were coming from. And we kind of give a little bit guidance there. And as we go forth, as we go into this process. And so those are those plans there. You're either at home, on campus, you're synchronous or asynchronous or traditional face-to-face. So you got to think about what your process is, or that blended, because some of you are doing blended. I will be, I haven't done that one before, but yeah, I could post that. The question is, where do you find the Zoom links for the meetings? The Zoom link is the same one that was in it it will be the same 2 that you already have, that you got in today for your morning editions. Your afternoon will be the same. And as you go forth into this process, I will put those links. I try not to put them on the website because, you know, I'm trying to keep security, but they will be out there on the PowerPoint so that you can pull it. So, all right. I hope everyone has a great day. Thank you for joining me today. Hopefully you are all doing well. Feel free to reach out, and we'll talk about program services. And so if anyone would like to share, I always like to hear what you're doing out there. And I think it helps our community as a whole. So I want to say thank you and have a good day.